Hi, everybody. This is Tracy Stuckrath with Thrive Meetings and Events and the Eating at a Meeting podcast livecast for the week of October 26th. And I'm excited to have on the show a fellow La Dame d'Escoffier member. I did say that right, a Dame, Dr. Sabrina Falquier Montgrain. She is a primary care physician in San Diego, beautiful city, at Sharp Reese Steely Medical Group. She specializes in culinary medicine and is the founder of Sensation Salud, LLC. Born and raised in Mexico City to Swiss and American parents, Dr. Sabrina takes this multilingual and multicultural life experience into her expertise in culinary medicine. Her focus is awakening the senses around ingredient acquisition and food preparation while empowering you and me to better health through nutritional knowledge and culinary literacy. Wow, there's so much in there. I just want to delve into every single aspect of that bio. Hi, Sabrina.
Hi, so good to be here, Tracy. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So glad to have you. So, yeah, I had all these questions I was going to ask you, but let's delve right into that bio real quick. All right, so culinary medicine, and I heard that term a couple of years ago, probably 10 years ago, through Institute for Integrative Nutrition and through some other conferences. Tell me about, what does that mean, culinary medicine?
So it's so funny because the definition is often where we need to start. It's so new and it's a really exciting field that it's actually, for me, a specialty I never even knew existed. I'd been doing internal medicine at that point for about 11, 12 years. And I went to a conference actually at the Culinary Institute of America that was a collaboration between the Harvard School of Public Health and the Culinary Institute of America. And the keynote speaker started talking about that joining of health and food. And I literally started crying and realizing, wow, this is the joining of these worlds of mine of loving food and really talking about food with patients already, but without that structure. And so really what culinary medicine is really teaching people about the nutritional aspect. So what happens to my body if I eat X versus Y for breakfast? So if I have a really sugary, sugar sweetened coffee with a donut for breakfast versus if I have a more balanced meal, what does that do to my body short and long term for that day over those few hours, but also over years and decades. And so it's really teaching people the good and the bad. I don't like putting these terms, but really knowledge is power in this sense. And then taking that knowledge that you give them and then translating it to how does that look when they go grocery shopping, when they are, crazy busy with 3 jobs and 4 children, and then taking it to the how. How do I take that information and put that on my plate for myself, my family, my community on a regular basis?
That's really good. I mean, because you grow up eating something that your mom's always given you, and that may not, or dad, and that may not be the best for you now. It may not have been the best for you then, but like for me, even when I got diagnosed with candida or allergy to yeast, I had to remove, pork and peanuts and sugar and vinegar. And I'm like, okay, what do I eat now? And it does, you have to learn something new versus going and getting the staples that you're used to having. And it's hard.
Yeah, it is. And often it can be really paralyzing. This diagnosis of Candida for you, or diabetes is a frequent one that comes up, or high blood pressure, obesity. I mean, all these diagnoses, that a lot of times you realize, I'm paralyzed. What am I supposed to eat? Bland boiled broccoli. And that's my fate. And that's what I love about having those conversations and having the knowledge. And that's what I love about this specialty is often in medicine, when we go through medical school, and luckily things are finally changing for people going through many medical schools now, but we weren't taught much about nutrition at all. So there was a sense of, you have a patient, you diagnose them with diabetes, you say, eat a diabetic healthy diet. Well, what does that mean? I mean, they're still going back, like you said, to their pantry. They have their things that they're used to buying. And so talking to them, asking them, what are you currently eating? And then helping teach them how do we move their food choices, their palate, their cultural upbringing of what was delicious, what was grandma's or mom's or dad's favorite recipe that made them feel good, and realizing you're not completely losing that. You are transitioning it to a way that's more sustainable for health or short and long term.
Well, okay, so for the first thing, it just popped into my brain. The siete into my bread. I don't
like you want to go into bread.
Exactly. It reminds me of the brand Siete, which is, she's Mexican and Hispanic, and she was diagnosed with, I think it's celiac disease or a different autoimmune disease, and she couldn't eat her grandmother's tortillas. And so she created this new brand, and it's, oh my God, cassava, using the cassava plant. So she has cassava chips. And when she got her grandmother's approval that these were fantastic tortillas, Siete is the 7 members of her family. I'm like, they started this brand, and now they've got tortillas and chips and salsas and all kinds of things. And that's the way, kind of what you just said, is not taking that diagnosis that she had and not being trapped by it, but finding a new way.
Yes. And to bring this, because in that situation, so this person had to go to cassava, which is essentially a root that is used to make, many different foods now. And it's interesting because in some cultures that's used all the time, not necessarily in Latino and kind of the corn tortillas that we're used to. But a lot of times it's not even that specific. So for example, a lot of times when people come in, like, again, we'll just go with a diagnosis of diabetes because it's so prominent. And when we ask them what they're eating or not eating, often it's as simple as they're just not putting any fruits and vegetables on their plate. So there's lack of that knowledge of realizing with simple movement. So say someone is used to having a giant steak that fills up the whole plate. If you inch it and say, well, let's work on filling up half that plate with vegetables and fruits and making that steak smaller so it only fills up a quarter of the plate, and then adding whole grains rather than processed grains. So a lot of times it's the processed grains. So we think of the carbs, the pastries, the pastas, the white rice, all those. And those are the ones that are, one, quickly change to sugar, but they also cause a lot of different inflammatory aspects of the body. So there's this lack of knowledge of saying, well, someone's going to take away my Mexican food, and say, no, what if we make a veggie hash that has your cumin, your paprika, all those flavors, the jalapenos, but make it with predominantly vegetables and fruits. And then, yes, if your family or yourself has to have that steak, let's do it. But the steak that was filling one person now is going to feed a whole family. So that's also, we look at price, because people talk about health and this concern that healthy is expensive, and realizing let's cost compare. Let's think about how much meat is, because that's often what costs the most money, and using our efforts to move towards more sustainable, healthy foods.
So how do you get my friend Mark, that eats like 2 vegetables, to broaden his perspective? You should have seen him when I challenged him to eat a beet, he ate a cube. I'm like, how do you, so like the people like Mark, but how do you get them to introduce more vegetables? Because they're boiled Brussels sprouts that somebody made for them growing up. Those are just so gross. They're so much better roasted. But how can you help people incorporate those things? And I think you're doing that with the cooking demos and stuff that you're doing.
Yeah. So it's funny. My favorite is actually to get people in the kitchen, and that the hands-on experience by far, that awkwardness of holding a knife and being faced with this thing that now has to be cut up and transitioned. So whatever the vegetable is, that's where the money is. I mean, those are the experience where you see these absolute aha moments of, oh, I can do this. And wow, if I cut it up, that transitions the health. And it's funny that you asked that question, because recently someone posed a question of, how do you explain your specialty in very simple words? And I would say it's teaching 40-year-olds to like their broccoli. So essentially, and that's a lot of it, is saying how, and I hate that I just use broccoli because that's always my example of food that, the bland boiled broccoli, but that sense of starting with, if you ask people, what are fruits or vegetables that you do like? And often they'll say, well, I don't like any. I'm like, can you just mention a couple? And it's essentially, again, now where we're starting from. and then teaching them, okay, if they did grow up, and Brussels sprouts is a perfect experience. My mother-in-law is British, and she moved to California and she's transitioned a lot, but she used to boil vegetables to no end. And when my kids were really young, she would help, and so fantastic watch these vegetables being boiled to death. I would want to reach for them, but not want to take away what she was helping me do. So, but that
True.
transition of realizing if you boil vegetables, they're limp, they're lifeless, they don't have that bright, beautiful color.
Yeah.
So roasting is a perfect way. And that's often how I've gotten kids to adults to really transition, is showing the simple act of roasting trays of vegetables and then laying them out. So making sure you always include the one that somebody already enjoys, and then adding variety, and it literally just center the plate, starting just those nibbles, like you mentioned with that beet. That's a good start. And often it can take 5 to 10, sometimes 20 tries until somebody embraces a new food flavor. The other way is making sure that you incorporate it. Like we talked about the veggie hash. So if you add the spices and the herbs and the flavor profile that somebody already enjoys, the way to as well, to incorporate it in the flavor profile that they enjoy. And that's, I've gotten a lot of, sometimes it's not, but they say, if I cook this at home for my husband, for example, no one will ever eat it. And the last thing one wants to do when you're the primary food maker in the household is to feel like you're a short order cook for each household member. So that the stir fries, curries, and veggie hash are huge, and roasting vegetables are a huge way to transition towards improving the palate that people, to essentially expand the palate for vegetables.
Well, my friend Marie is like, I like that example that you just used. That's what I was talking about. So it really, I was doing pescatarian for about a month and a half, a couple of months ago. And it really makes me change the outlook. So my mom was making tacos. And so I'm like, okay, what can I do? Vegan tacos, or, vegetarian tacos. And I found a quinoa recipe that uses, like you said, the cumin and the chipotle pepper powder and all of that. And I was amazed. And you roasted the quinoa, you cooked it, and then you roasted it with those spices on there. And it totally tasted like taco meat. And but it blew my mind that you can actually figure that out. And I'm glad other people are figuring that out, so I can just take their recipes and do them. But it does help adding spices and herbs. It's really important to do that.
Yeah. And the interesting part is, if you look at parts of the world that are the healthiest, they are predominantly ones that really use herbs and spices, and really emphasize really making those vegetables the center stage on the plate. And then if you use animal proteins or grains, they're not the assistance, they are the side dish. And that's what we often use these terms in culinary medicine. One's the protein flip. So it's that sense of that steak being kind of on the side and those vegetables really being highlighted. And then learning simple methods of sauteing, roasting, to bring out the beautiful flavor, and then going back to the root of the food. So if I'm buying food from the farmer's market or from a CSA box, those vegetables, that produce is going to be at peak. So the flavor itself is going to shine a lot more. So because often, and we see this kind of really going back to French cooking and how they were taught, it was all really based on the sauces. Really, the sauces were the center stage. And as the California cuisine movement moved in the 40s and 50s, and especially in the 60s, there was this transition of saying, hey, we have this gorgeous produce. Why are we going to blanket it with this cream sauce that's going to really forget the highlight on the plate? And so really thinking about where you're getting your food. And we are so lucky. I mean, I live in California, and so we have the luxury of fresh produce year round. But even in other areas, even thinking about frozen vegetables, those are picked peak season, and they are, so essentially they're peak of flavor, peak of nutrition. So realizing you don't need to live in California to get those peak flavors, but to realize when we're cooking, if we really have to think about what the freshness of each component that you're utilizing. And speaking of spices, those are meant to be kept for about 6 months or so at the most. Most of us have some that maybe we got for our wedding, or maybe when we went to college, and they really lose their umph.
Right.
So not saying you have to throw it all out, but often if you're using a dry spice, just rubbing it in your thumb kind of releases some of those oils. But if they've been there for 10, 20 years, really, there's not many oils left, or they'll be rancid. So also thinking about if we're using dried herbs, of how ancient are they, and perhaps a little refresher would be good.
We need to get McCormick and everybody else to just do small jars of them instead of those big ones, because that's why we keep them. Because those big ones, smaller ones, or even Whole Foods when you can go or the spice shops that you can get small packages of them instead. Yeah, that's so much better. So when I was promoting this, one of the things that you wrote in there in your answer when I asked you, what do you wish people knew about what you do? And it was, one of the things was that we've lost the ability to know how to cook. And we've been talking about that a little bit. But as a doctor who's now focused on, culinary medicine, have you seen changes in your patients by, helping them look at it this way?
Yeah. Yes, a lot. So pretty much every appointment, unless it's for, a simple infection that we're just working with that. But I always ask what they're eating. And I think at first they kind of get the shock, and the answer is usually like, well, yesterday wasn't my best day. So there's kind of this caveat. And I have to blanket it with, there's no judgment here, but really trying to get a starting point. And we talking about food. We ask, we get vitals like blood pressure and pulse and weight every time somebody comes to the doctor's office and then we ask about smoking. Is someone smoking? Has someone, was someone ever a smoker? But we don't often ask about nutrition. What are they eating? How much are they moving their body? And really emphasizing the need to ask that on a more regular basis. And so I've been doing this now for years, and realizing, okay, let's take where they're at. Let's make a small goal, and ask them what they feel like they could accomplish between now and our next appointment. So I might have what I want them to accomplish, but it may be very different for them. And sometimes it may be, especially currently with the pandemic, there's a lot of snacking, a lot of emotional eating. And that's a huge aspect about the food that we choose to eat, or like a food-like substance, if it's, something really processed, is saying, okay, why are you eating, or why are you snacking all day? And a lot of the times we don't even get to actually making food changes until several appointments in, because the psychology of it is such a big part of it. So sometimes it may be just having them stop and say, think of how you feel after you have gone through the drive-through and eaten that burger for the third time this week. How does your body feel right after? How do you feel about having done the drive-through?
Right.
So that's a big part of it. The other piece is really, when I talk about the bio, and culinary literacy is a term that is sometimes not known to people, but that ability to be able to know what to do, how to shop, how to convert ingredients to something that's going to be on your plate.
Right.
And so that we know that countries, so in the United States, we have some of the highest rates of obesity in all age groups. And we now have, this is not a claim to fame, but the generation of kids now are going to live less years than their generations before, which is really shocking. And a lot of that comes to the increased rates of obesity that we're seeing in kids. And when we look at countries that have much reduced rates of obesity, they cook at home a lot more. And when I say a lot more, it's 20 minutes more a day. So it's not that they're spending hours in the kitchen. They just are seeing and transitioning simple ingredients to meals on a regular basis. So that's what I would say. If there's a change that I want to see, is to bring people back into the kitchen, and to remember that it's not that one household member is stuck in the kitchen while everybody else is on video games or watching the game on TV, but to bring back to the kitchen being a place where we gather. So maybe there is a primary person cooking. Right. What about the other people talking about their day, or asking that person, hey, can you shred this lettuce while I do this other aspect of it? Because the more people see what happens in the kitchen, the more interested, the more willing they are to try that new vegetable.
Right.
And that starts, we talk about kids, and that starts, but it also goes with people that, again, may not be the one that's cooking in the household. So that's a lot. I just said a mouthful, but there's so many aspects of it. Yeah.
Right. Well, and my Saturday routine is to get up and go to the New Bern Farmers Market, and there's 3 organic farmers that I visit and buy from pretty much only. And I got turnips the other day, and my mom brought them home. What are you going to do with those turnips? I'm going to eat turnips, So I Googled and I found like 41 recipes to do, turnips, because they kind of taste like radishes. So you can slice them and put them in as like radishes in a salad, or you can roast them. And so, introducing even my parents into different vegetables as well is, and my new thing is okra. I am like addicted to okra and pickled okra right now too. My dad and I are like, oh, where can we get some more? But so the there are all kinds of diets out there, and so 2 questions. People are on keto. People are on, the Atkins diet. They're on paleo diet. They're vegan. They're vegetarian. They're pescatarian. They're reducitarian, or, which is just reducing the amount of animal proteins. Do we really need to go that far, to lose weight, or counting calories? I got 2 friends that have lost a lot of weight by literally counting the calories in and the calories out. Do we need to do that? I mean, I don't, and this may not be a blanket answer, but or can we just simply change a lot of the way we eat?
So we're all looking for the magic pill, right? The magic diet, the magic, take these pounds from the last 50 years off in 10 weeks because I have a wedding coming up or graduation.
Yes.
And what's interesting is a lot of that is really looking for structure. Tell me what to eat and I will follow this.
Okay.
And the goal is, well, a bit of it is a lot of times you can get so tangled up. So you just mentioned about 10 different diets. Some of them are similar. Some of them are completely polar opposites as far as what you're allowed to have on your plate. And I always think, okay, if somebody comes in, I have read about this, I want to follow it. And really thinking about the big one is, are there major food groups that are being left off the plate that might affect your body long-term?
Right.
So that's one of the big pieces that I always want to bring up. And one of the things I want to think about is the goal, I feel, with our relationship with food is to get to a point where we're not having to count calories. We are enjoying food. We are creating a structure, a nucleus that you follow about 80 to 90% of the time of really giving your body food is fuel. Like we talked about the title for this talk, of really thinking about, it's not just calories aren't just calories. There's empty calories where essentially, yeah, you're bringing in calories into your body, but there may be zero nutritional aspects to that. So when we think about why do we need to eat, and we need to eat to get fuel, we need to get nutrients. And when we think about the simplest way of thinking about eating is if we think about our plate. And I actually love that when we think about nutrition, we finally transition from this triangle that's like, well, what does that mean? What does that look like on my plate? Because ultimately we think of micronutrient. I need calcium, I need iron. Like we hear and know all these things, but
right.
What does iron look like on a plate?
Yeah.
And there was actually one of my amazing colleagues just gave a talk, and I think she had the perfect visual of culinary medicine. Is the first was a picture of the chemical structure of iron, and then the next was a picture of a salad that was leafy greens, which are really high in iron, and to take in that iron, you need vitamin C. So what was on the plate? A citrus made with citrus vinaigrette and some citrus foods. So there you go. That's culinary medicine shown to you. You take the chemical structure, what your body needs, but then you take it and actually, what does it look like when you're cooking in the kitchen? So again, that plate, when we think of what we want, so you have this round plate, half of that plate should be vegetables and fruits, pretty much with every meal and every snack. And then a quarter of the plate should be whole grains. And that's a big aspect, is when we look at diets and otherwise, the broad strokes is eating real food and then giving you structure of how to eat that real food. And then the last quarter is well thought out protein. So again, depending on what pattern you're eating that well thought out protein, you may be told to eat all animal products. You may be told to eat all plant-based products. We know from a cardiovascular, so reducing your risk of heart attacks and strokes later on, the more we move to eating more plants, the better. So eating plant-based proteins like beans and lentils, hummus, tofu, edamame, those are really good sources. Yet, I know that if I tell my patients, hey, don't touch animal flesh ever in your life, and they're meat and potatoes or a standard American diet household, I'm going to lose them. Right. So again, it's not all or nothing. It's not saying, okay, you have to do this or you're going to die tomorrow. It's saying, how can we inch you to add more plants to your diet? And right there, I'm pausing because I hate the word diet. I cheated. I'm off the diet. And the counting calories or that structure helps people. They've actually shown if people use apps where you too keep track of, either food diary or what comes in, comes out, can be helpful again, because it's giving people parameters. Sometimes people can do that for a few days or a few weeks, and they can now realize, oh, if I reach for that second slice of pizza or third slice of pizza or eat the whole pizza, oh, wow, I really lose it. But maybe if I have one or two slices and then have a delicious salad to go with it, that makes a big difference. And salads can be what we call the sad salad, of like the limp salad that you get, on the side of a dish, or it can be delicious and include all those parameters. So when I say that plate, I'm not saying you have to divide your plate kind of toddler style. Some people like it. Even some adults need to go toddler style. But that realization of, if I'm making, for example, a smoothie for breakfast, so I put, my berries and some spinach in there, that's going to give me some of that iron, and those berries and some citrus-based fruits, that's going to be able to allow, again, that iron and that spinach to come in. And then now that's half that plate, I've filled it up. But let's add some whole grains. So I can put some raw oats or seeds or nuts in there. And the same thing, those nuts and seeds are also going to give me some protein. So there, even in a blender, I'm creating a meal that covers those bases. And the reason for those bases are, not only am I hitting those nutritional markers, so I'm getting those vitamins and minerals, the proteins, and I have to pause on the protein, because we don't need animal fresh protein to make protein. What we need are the building blocks, which are the amino acids that we get through variety of plants and vegetables. So that there's definitely a misnomer of saying I need to eat animal flesh to make strong muscles. So
it's complicated.
Yes. I will summarize to make it less complicated. Continue.
It gets complicated. So one, and in my questions beforehand too, I ask you a negative example of where, individual food and beverage that negatively affected you around food and beverage. And you, of course, brought up a conference. So I'm curious, because Dr. What's his name we mentioned
Dr. Harlan,
mentioned, I think it was him that, went to the one doctor's convention, and the snacks, and it was about obesity, and the snacks were brownies and chips and cookies, and we're at the national whatever convention, and that's all that was offered. So 2 questions. How can meeting planners work to change that with the chefs who are not trained about nutrition? And 2, was the food as medicine, or the conference that you went to with CIA and Harvard Medical School, were the snacks better for you than the brownies?
Such good question. So I think one of the parts I was blown away, it's called Healthy Kitchens, Healthy Lives, is that conference up at the CIA. And the food fully reflects what is being told at the conference. That's amazing. And that is right there. We can stop right there. It's a sense of what are you trying to promote, or what message are you trying to give as an industry, and here I am in the healthcare industry, and it's the same. Most conferences, luckily, we're finally changing, but yeah, it's the brownies, it's the snacks, it's kind of that comfort food and that fast, quick food, and realizing that if we teach and show at a conference what can fuel your body, what can feel good, then we're moving in a better direction. So Healthy Kitchens, Healthy Lives health meets food. These conferences have definitely transitioned to showing, because what a better way to then to go home after that meeting and say, oh, and they give you all the recipes too of everything you're tasting. So
Oh,
then
wow.
you can take that recipe and give it to your patient. Choose a few, try them at home. That's the whole point of realizing, oh, this isn't hard to do. I can make energy bars that fill that same role as the brownies. They can have the same, there's these truffles that I learned to make at that conference that I now make for many events. My kids love them. And they're just as comfort giving, yet they are filled with nutritionally dense food. So again, it's not the one or the other. And I always feel like I have to say this. I love delicious food. My goal is you make this delicious food. And if either I do a demo or a hands-on class, I don't talk about the health aspects until after people have tasted, enjoyed, say how much they love it. And then I can say, wow, wasn't that amazing? And it's really good for your body. So it's not one or the other. So, and then to go back to the question of the conferences, one of the other favorite parts I love about culinary medicine is that bridging of the silos. So we have chefs that are in one place, we have nutritionists, we have doctors, and I have to put nutritionists and doctors in separate silos overall, because you have nutritionists and dietitians that know the micronutrients, you have the doctors that know how to give pills overall, but not many who can do both. And again, there's this disconnect. So having that beautiful place, and a colleague of mine and I have worked really hard at our medical group to, when we have big conferences, to talk to the chefs, the people that are in charge of the meeting, to make a bridge of what are we feeding, what can we do, what's on their potential, because there are limitations we realize as a hotel that we may be working with, and say, okay, what choices do you have? Because at least often they'll have brown rice instead of white rice as an option. So these small pieces, just like I talk about with patients, we can move that needle and have that educational piece with the chefs as well. And I love those conversations. Those are some of my most really rewarding pieces that they're learning, and they feel excited because often they're nervous to be feeding doctors, because they know doctors are about health, and to teach them what can be done there. So that's a piece. And then the other part that's the irony is, of all the varied audience members that I've had, the doctors are often the hardest to have these conversations with. We are smart individuals. We went to school for dozens of years, and now someone's telling us that there may be some limitations on the knowledge that we have. And we have changed the food that we now serve at our monthly meetings, at the board meetings, and luckily now there's a lot of anger that's come of how dare you tell me what to eat, when in fact you were already being told what to eat because somebody else was already feeding you, and now we're just giving knowledge. And now we've gotten the more positive feedback of like, wow, when I sit in the board meetings, which are often 4 to 6 hours, I feel so much better because we're not eating really fat laden food that really logs us down, and we don't have the energy to make it through the meeting. So what I love about that is that they're decision makers in our medical group, and they're seeing the immediate effects of how to fuel your body with something that's sustainable rather than something that just makes you feel heavy and difficult with endurance, even in a 4 to 6 hour meeting.
Oh, totally. And it reminds me of, what you just said too, is like, you're already being told what to eat, because as one of my friends in my old corporate job she's like, Tracy, as the meeting planner, you're everybody's mama, because we're in charge of organizing the entire conference, but we're also in charge of ordering the food. And as the people responsible for ordering food for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, 5 times a day, you actually have a responsibility of what you're serving, to those attendees, because you do want their experience to be the best that it can be, because they're paying a lot of money, and I would think you want them to learn from what you're teaching at that conference. This one woman came up to me after one of my sessions, this was years ago, and she's like, all of my people, they're overweight and they really just want that comfort food and they want the bad stuff. And I said, a way to look at it is that they're your members, they're your employees. And when you're spending money on them, you want them to be healthy. And this is what we're serving you. If you want to go to McDonald's or you want to go somewhere else and eat something else, off of our dime or on your own time, then feel free to do that. But we want you back here next week. We want you back here tomorrow or next year. So we're going to feed you healthier options when you're under our watch. And I think that's a good way for a meeting planner to look at it. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's interesting how that is put forward, right? So if in preparation you say, just so you know, at this conference, we're going to serve all healthy food, I could just see the balking, right? God.
Yeah.
And the adjectives, the juicy adjectives that you use around the description of the food make such a big difference. And they've actually looked at this, which I find really kind of amusing, but also you realize the psychology around eating is they actually did a study where this is in college, so same thing in the dorms, where someone's everyone's mama, right? Like feeding them regularly. And one was like the broccoli, the this and that. And another one was like fire roasted broccoli. It was the exact same dish, but with juicier adjectives. And the percent of how many more vegetables were eaten with the descriptors of that were enticing was night and day difference.
Really?
So how you present it makes a huge difference. And to go along with that too, the sense of giving people guidance. People want walls, right? We think of toddlers and, they're running to the street and they learn, oh, street's bad. Okay, I won't do that anymore. And we're, even as adults, we're looking for guidance and to find that bridge, that place. And what we started doing at our conferences too, is actually doing a sample plate to start with of showing that half plate, the quarter, just to give that visual cue before they start going through the buffet of, okay, this would be a really good guidance. And often with that plate, you're also then giving portion sizes. So that sometimes starts limiting that sense of weighing food or calorie counting, because you're already starting to nudge them into that space, those parameters.
Yeah. And as we're in no buffet or the server serving the buffet, you can actually help reduce the portion sizes with the server serving it. Except, when you go to some fast food places, the amount of scoops of rice or guacamole or whatever they put on there, I'm like, you just made my dish so many more calories. So I'm like, no, I only want half of what you're serving. I'll pay for it, but I just want half of it. But so, what do you think, going forward as we do this, what's the best course of action for somebody to start thinking? I mean, you really kind of already done it, is looking at that plate and looking at half of it is vegetables. And, if broccoli is your only vegetable that you like, how do you delve into new ones? Just 3 tips that you think that can help people move forward in eating healthier, more nutritiously, I should say.
Yes. So when I think about, okay, what can you do? You've heard this podcast and you're thinking, wow, I'm motivated. I'm going to do this. And I think, okay, how do you prepare? So next time you acquire ingredient acquisition. I love it. My husband laughed when I used that term. It sounds so scientific for grocery shopping. But essentially, we don't all get our food at the grocery store. But so thinking ahead, okay, what does my week ahead look like for me, for my household? And knowing that often when we go to the farmer's market, like Tracy, you mentioned going to the farmer's market, there's this, I'm going to learn how to roast turnips and all these things. And then you come home and you're tired and now you order in. So it's being realistic of, okay, I know I have meetings on this and this day. I know I am done for these days when I work extra long hours. So being realistic of what the week ahead will look like. So then using those ingredients that you brought in, and using simple methods. So again, if broccoli is your friend, roasting trays of broccoli, maybe adding 1 or 2 more that you mix with the broccoli. So you're starting to get more flavors, more textures, and thinking about, okay, if I roast trays of vegetables, then I can use those in different ways. So first day, maybe it'll be a warm side dish, or main dish, if we're saying it's the center stage. The next morning, maybe I take those roasted vegetables, and if you eat eggs, fry an egg and put an egg on top. So now I'm eating vegetables for breakfast.
I do that.
And then maybe that night you mix those vegetables with your favorite broth, and now you have vegetable soup that all came from one time that you roasted vegetables. So we call that batch cooking, of utilizing your time in the kitchen to then be able to be your own sous chef when days get busy. Also grocery shopping, knowing that there's going to be days when there is no umph at all. So one of the go-tos I always have in my fridge is hummus. So that'll fit that protein mark. Whole wheat pita. I can eat gluten. I have no sensitivities on those. So whole wheat pita and then raw vegetables. So essentially knowing that within the time that it takes to warm up my pita, I'm going to have a meal that fits those nutritional markers. Is it exciting? Not really, but I'm going to consciously sit and enjoy that meal and know that I'm essentially, when we think of how often we mindlessly eat while we're driving, putting calories in as we're going to our next event, and we don't even notice what we ate. So that hummus, whole wheat pita, and the vegetables is already better than a bar that claims to have all these health fixes, but it's often really processed. So, and we don't even remember we ate it. So then we're hungry 10 minutes later.
Yes.
So if you're making me bullet point, which you can tell I'm not very good at. So number one is prepare for the week ahead. And it doesn't mean you have to make these complicated meals, but batch cooking. So either roasting a bunch of vegetables, sauteing some vegetables, cooking 1 or 2 whole grains that you can keep in your fridge. I always say clear containers so you can see them and not forget about them, and using those in different ways. And then the third one is, if you do eat animal flesh on the weekend, is a good time again to roast some breasts of chicken or otherwise, or have something like fish that easily cooks very easily, and then know to use that within a couple of days because that doesn't do too well. So preparing, having cans of beans that you can easily open up, and don't feel guilty about having canned beans and not doing the overnight, soak. So being kind with this, and then preparing your fridge and your pantry to be able to go from these components.
Those are awesome ideas. I eat a lot of that stuff you already mentioned, so that's a good thing. Okay, so we're at 40 minutes. Wow. We could talk for hours. So to end this, what is your favorite food or favorite drink?
I always have such a hard time with this one because like I said, I love food, but I grew up in Mexico City. I don't look like I did, but born and raised there. And so I got to go back to sopes there with all the fixings. So the salsa verde cruda. So it has all the deliciousness of the Mexican flavors that I absolutely love. And then for the drinks, it's funny because we're transitioning into colder months, so I don't crave it as much. But in the summer, I absolutely love drinks again that have fresh squeezed juices in there. My husband perfected this Paloma recipe this summer that has fresh squeezed grapefruit and lime and a little bit of tequila and some sparkling water. So even with that, so you can do this with margaritas or otherwise, is using real ingredients because it has that tartness and that vitamin C. So I'm not saying it's healthy. I'm not saying tequila on a regular basis is healthy, but really letting those natural flavors shine. So that's where, and water. I have to say the water. I do like hydrating with my spa waters.
Exactly. Oh, thank you so much. And I think I might have you come back and do a cooking class if you're up for that, just to have a virtual cooking class and everybody just, getting the ingredients in advance and doing it online. Are you up for that?
I'm absolutely up for that.
Okay.
You know how to get in touch with me.
I do. All right. Well, and everybody, I will share actually, while we're at it, what is your website address? And I know I've got it, but
yeah. So it's sensationsalud.com. So, and then same thing, all the handles for social media are also Sensation Salud, which is my company.
Okay. And I am posting those now, and I'm going to get the Instagram one at least on here too. Okay. Maybe it's not posted. It is. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sabrina. I really appreciate it. Dr. Sabrina.
Thank you, Tracy. I really enjoyed all our conversations also leading up to this. I really learning more about what you do, and I take my hat off that there really is much more of a bigger light on meetings and how we're feeding how we're feeding people and excluding and including more people as we do this conversations.
It's really important. And, food is central to everything that we do, and, at meetings and outside of meetings. So it's really important to focus on what it means to eat and how to do it better. So thank you everybody for tuning in to Eating at a Meeting. This is a live cast /podcast that airs every Wednesday on Facebook and YouTube. And the podcast is now live. We've got, I think, 18 episodes. And you can go to eatingatameetingpodcast.com, or you can find it on Apple iTunes and all your other favorite podcast platforms. Thanks for listening, and until next time.